to the Wellness Show. I'm Dr. Keisha Christian, your host, and so glad that you tuned in for this episode. Again, in continuation of nutrition. Nutrition is one of the fundamentals into health and wellness, and what better way to learn more about nutrition than the nutrition guru himself. I love that you provide cooking classes and demos for people because that's a key component where people can learn what they can eat inexpensively and how to prepare it, the best way to prepare it.
Or just prepare it at all.
That's true.
You might be surprised / scared at how many people do not cook. They rely on, whether it's fast food or some type of restaurant situation to make it for them.
Right.
So just the act of cooking in and of itself is a lost art. So, and I don't claim to be like a great chef or anything, but what we've learned over the years is how to make some of these dishes. And so for most people, most clients, they kind of obey a simple set of rules. One, it's going to be time efficient.
Sure.
Because I'm yet to meet someone who's like, I just have like a ton of spare time. What's like a really long recipe that can take all day?
Sure.
No one got that. So it's got to be time efficient. It's got to be relatively cheap. It's got to have ingredients that, maybe they're not common to them immediately, but they will become common to them. So they're not shopping for like one ingredient and it never gets touched for 2 years and you throw it away. So common ingredients, quick, creates leftovers. If you're cooking every single meal, it's just an upward battle. And again, we're talking about people, for the majority of the population, they don't like to or cook much, so to ask them to cook every meal, it's a fail. So quick, easy, leftovers, common ingredients, super healthy, hopefully inexpensive.
That's a great marriage.
That's a lot of metrics.
Yeah, that's a great marriage of those five.
Yeah, so that's kind of like the crux of most of the recipes that we try to search out. And so that's actually a piece that is going to be on our website. We've got a lot of things ready to go as far as recipes. We've hesitated in that piece for so long because we feel like we're just with the information side of it and more of the clinical and actionable side. But so many people want these recipes, and we end up sending them to like a dozen different places for these different things. And we've modified them over the years ourselves, and we're just going to kind of have it's not going to be robust, but there will be a good selection of stuff for people to look at and get started all in one spot, so they just don't have to shop around, I guess, to get started.
Right, that's good to know.
Our aim is not to have this massive recipe index, but I think people they want simplicity.
Right, they want simplicity, and they need to know. They need to know what they can do to be healthier and prevent a lot of these conditions.
Yes.
Diabetes continues to overwhelm so many people in our communities, and whether it's genetics or poor exercise, physical activity, and nutrition habits, whether it is that they have other conditions that could be a precursor to diabetes, there are so many reasons why diabetes has really overwhelmed our population. So what are some tips that people can employ in preventing diabetes?
Another brutal one. It's ridiculous. Most of it's avoidable, especially, essentially we're boiling down to two types. There are a few more, but we'll just keep it to type 1 and type 2 is what most people face. Type 1 is largely genetic. There are some dietary components that can cause it, but once it's here, it's here. It's kind of a done deal. There's going to be, I believe, an artificial pancreas that's FDA approved next year.
Oh, okay.
It's relatively
interesting.
soon, which is going to be tremendous. So it's like, that's a really cool tool for that population.
Yes, for type 1,
so it basically monitors real time, just like your pancreas would. So
because you think about that primarily affects juveniles, and starting with juveniles, of course, and it's like they didn't have an option to make any changes, lifestyle changes in order to prevent diabetes. They were just basically...
Yeah, they're not prepared for that.
No, they're not.
Yeah, so
they're
if you
not.
can take that burden off of them, that's going to streamline a lot of their reality.
And you think a lot of adults don't even understand diabetes and how it's caused and all of the intricacies of diabetes, much less a child. So that's great. That's a great invention that they will bring forth next year.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's next year. It's soon.
Okay, good.
But when we're talking diabetes, for practical purposes, we're talking type 2. And so that's, I think by 2020, the estimation is half of the adults in the United States, or basically modernized countries, will be pre or full-on diabetic. That's unacceptable. I
agree.
So So that's kind of a description of type 1 diabetes. So that's when the pancreas is insufficient in providing insulin at a needed level, which is why they need the shots or the additional.
Yes.
Then type 2 is when the body can still make enough insulin, but the cells are no longer responding properly. And so when we get to like, why is that happening? Most people think like, oh, it's sugar, because obviously
Right.
diabetes and high blood sugar levels, but that's more the symptom, that's not the cause, right? That's totally the symptom, not the cause. And so when we look, when you look closer at the mechanism, it's actually in the cells, specifically like the muscle cells, which are the primary absorbers of glucose and
Right.
sugar in the blood. They're literally packed full of fat, like they have little fat droplets. And so diabetes is now understood as a disease of lipotoxicity. So it's actually excess saturated, it can be all fats, but it's specifically fats in our diets that accumulate over time, which is why it used to be adult onset. Because even our terrible diets 50 years ago, it at least wasn't as bad as they are now.
Sure.
They had to remove that name and call it type 2 because even children have dietary habits that are questionable enough to get these insulin-resistant symptoms at a younger age. So again, it's a boring conversation, but it's the same one. Getting the fiber number up, getting the saturated fat and overall fat intake down to you could almost just describe it as like a historically reasonable level. Like these diseases didn't exist in very large numbers 70, 80 years ago, and all the time before that. This is our generation's and the next few's issues.
And it's growing.
Yeah, and it's new. It's not something that's normal.
Right.
Like for a lot of people stuck in their day to day, a lot of these things we're discussing, that's a normal. My parents had high cholesterol, so I'm gonna have it. But it's not normal in the human experience.
Right. So it's preventable.
Absolutely preventable and largely reversible in a lot of cases. So it's we type 2 diabetes and cholesterol are my favorite two to work with because diet has such a strong influence, and you can see the numbers.
Right.
So you get the feedback loop, and so people get excited, and you can measurably move these things in the right direction rapidly with an appropriate dietary approach.
So with the diet that you recommended just a moment ago, you can reverse. So for those who have diabetes, they can reverse it.
In some cases,
In most cases.
there's always an asterisk there. Like,
Right.
I would never be like, oh, we're going to reverse your diabetes. But if someone's had type 2 diabetes, if it's been less than 10 years, maybe 12 years, the pancreas is likely still functioning. And so if you can just pull the fat out of those muscle cells, and again, that sounds really hokey, but that's the mechanism to return that.
It's basic physiology.
Get that insulin resistance to be correct. And we've seen it in real time, tons of continuing education classes.
Sure.
That's just where diabetes is, and that's the corrective measure.
So for those who have become more progressive stages, insulin dependent, what are some recommendations for nutrition?
Yes, so if it's later down the road, you can always have an impact, right? Even in type 1 diabetics, where essentially you can never fix it,
right?
but you can certainly make the swings less wild. And here comes the boring piece again. Having, when you're choosing foods are high in fiber. So again, I hate to say it over and over, but the fiber piece is so critical to all this because that's kind of like a slow release pill.
Sure.
So if we're comparing someone who's on insulin or any situation like that, like you're describing, if you had a soda and just drink it down, that's going to be absorbed into the bloodstream very, very rapidly. And so it's going to cause a spike, and then the body is ill-equipped. It's ill-equipped even before diabetes, but it's ill-equipped with diabetes to deal with that. And so that's just going to overwhelm the systems, whereas if you have an apple, any kind of carbohydrate that's real, like you mentioned complex carbohydrates, right? And complex is kind of code for unmodified or unprocessed.
Right. So it's pure.
Yeah, so that fiber, it makes it like a slow release pill.
Sure.
So it's then going to actually be absorbed at a much slower rate, and so the blood sugar curve is much slower, and it's easier for the body to respond to, both either through medications you're injecting or its own mechanisms to not have those swings. So it's like that just has to happen.
So common questions from people who have diabetes is, can I consume bananas? Can I consume oranges? What is your response?
Yeah, and this one, you might get comments on your site, and I welcome them. We can talk all day about it. So, yes, Yeah, so the idea that diabetics need to avoid fruit, that's, if we're talking 20 years ago, sure, we'd be on that bandwagon too,
Sure.
but the current understanding of the disease is that's not appropriate, that's not helpful, that's driving the wrong behaviors.
Now, is it best to, would you say, avoid sugary juices like maybe an orange juice, and maybe choose an orange as opposed to an orange juice?
100%.
Or choose an apple as opposed to apple juice?
100%.
So keep them in the purest form.
Yeah, or just their natural form, because then they're, again, the fiber, and there's other compounds, but we're just going to attribute it to fiber because it's just the easiest thing to talk about.
Sure.
But yeah, they're totally different items.
Absolutely.
They exist. They're metabolized differently as far as their rate of uptake and how they impact the blood sugar. So it's critical that it be just real food.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that is one major misconception that a lot of people have, is what can I consume and what I should avoid.
Yeah.
And that needs to be more defined, I think, when we're speaking of course, with diabetes. And it's an education component, seeking the proper education. Sometimes it might not be the best to go on the internet to do research, but to have some guided education from an expert like yourself. So that's very important.
Yeah, it's challenging because again, you almost don't know where to go. Like if you and I made a doctor's appointment, we just opened the phone book here in Raleigh. We went to we both made like 3 doctor's appointments, and just if you could fill out fake having diabetes, right?
Yes.
You give them this blood work, and they go, well, just I cannot count how many times I've had patients come in and say, well, they said avoid fruit, and there's a couple different things, and that's just patently wrong.
Right.
The fruit juices, the things you mentioned, yeah, the processed, the fiber removed, sugar added items, yeah, that's not great, that's not helpful, but diabetics having fruit, you go to the American Diabetes Association website,
Yes.
they've got great recipes, there are lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, lots of whole grains in all their recipes, because that's helpful.
And that's a credible source, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the easiest one to pick, but there's many others too, and so that's, I don't know if you're familiar with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes,
Neil Bernard,
absolutely.
all those guys do tremendous work, but they, tons of research published since like 2003, I think 80 plus studies, but they're looking at how do you treat type 2 diabetes. It's produce.
That's
And
produce.
it's what you mentioned in the first beginning, right? It's a lot of produce.
Yes.
Because that's what the body thrives on. That's
Now, there are people that have concerns. Frozen produce, of course, natural produce at its natural form, and then also canned produce. Can you just give us a glimpse of the differences, the nutrition of each? What is the best form of protein to have?
Yep. So best is arguable, but breaking each one down, right? So fresh, in theory, would be best, right? But that would be technically if it was like grown locally, and a lot of fresh produce, it might come from another country, it might come from halfway around the globe. So the things that have to occur for that to arrive and look great, there's some questionable stuff in there, but it's still good. At the end of the day, you never turn down produce.
Sure.
Never, ever, ever. So fresh is technically best, but when you talk about frozen can be just as good and in some cases better because it's typically cut and frozen very quickly. So again, now you have that produce from maybe far away that's not really changing. It's not having to be stored in different compounds and chemicals to keep it fresh.
And then you can store it in your refrigerator or freezer for a length of time.
Oh yeah, it doesn't go bad in 3 days.
Exactly.
Yeah, frozen fruits and vegetables are very, very helpful. And then canned, that's a little more insidious. This one takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort on the end user part. So you start with the cans themselves, right? So everyone knows, or most people know, BPA. It's not great. It's been banned from usage, but there are about a dozen other BP other chemicals. What's the ramifications of those going to be? We don't know. Probably not great. So at the end of the day, canned, you're already in a questionable content. But we still buy canned. You gotta pick your battles.
Right. Limit the can.
Yeah. And again, they don't come with BPA. So if anything else comes up and there's a problem, they'll move away from that. But there's also lots of containers now that are not metal. And they're like, I don't know if you've seen like the see-through.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So those, maybe there's something wrong with those, but we don't know what it is yet. But the people are they're trying to solve these problems.
Okay.
All right, so then we can't do that. So that's just something in the back of your head. But then the next piece of that is what's in there. So if you go to the grocery store and we're looking at the bean aisle, we pick up black beans, right? There might be 8 different varieties.
Sure.
Some will say low sodium, some might not say low sodium, some might say organic, but you don't even know what's in them until you flip it around. So, we use Food Line as our favorite example. They have their own in-house organic one. It says nothing about sodium on the front.
Okay.
And it's almost always the cheapest and lowest sodium content beans for all their flavors or all the varieties right on the shelf. And it's sitting right next to, a low sodium major brand. When you flip it around, it's like twice the sodium of someone else's who doesn't even make a point of calling it out. So that's where, food label reading is critical. So
now, does it make a difference? Could be minimal, but does it make a difference to rinse, of course, the canned produce that we purchase?
It can help, for sure. I mean, it's still going to absorb a percentage of that sodium that's in it, but at the end of the day, you can always give it a rinse.
Sure.
If we're talking about like garbanzo beans or chickpeas, you can actually save the liquid and use that for cooking. It's an egg substitute. It's called aquafaba. It's kind of a newer ingredient, but it has a lot of uses. So definitely make sure that one's low sodium, and then potentially save that for baking and other stuff.
Making soup.
Soup, or you make meringues.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of different. It's literally an egg substitute. So anything you use in baking for eggs,
right?
it likely has a application.
That's interesting.
Which of course will then provide 0 cholesterol.
Right.
0 issues.
Yeah. So that goes along with that. Absolutely. Beans are great. I love beans, and they're delicious and they're so healthy for you.
Yeah, they're phenomenal.
Yes. Wow, that's interesting. Let's move into sports. I know that's one of your passions, mine too. So, and we have lots of sports viewers as well. There are so many athletes that are engaged in a variety of sports, and we have the upcoming Winter Games in Korea, and then we also have Special Olympic Games. It's going to be in Seattle, Washington next year. So there are a lot of athletes that are designed to be at their competitive edge. They're on top of their game. But yet it's so important to ensure good nutrition in our athletes as well. So if you can share with us some of the tips that can enhance their performance while they are engaged in their sport.
Absolutely. So when we talk about most physical activity type sports, it's going to all be limited by endurance and energy levels. And so when we think about especially Olympic athletes, we're talking about people who are, even their requirements, they're not normal.
Right.
So using them as like a mirror for yourself isn't really applicable. So let's start with that, because a lot of people they see their LeBron James, they're athletes of choice, and they want to be and do that, and they might be able to, but that's not what they do year round. That's not how they are all the time, at least as they're presented. So that's not necessarily a healthy thing to strive for.
Right.
I guess we try to put that in correct context, which I probably didn't just then, but it is important though. But then when we talk about how to fuel, right? So it's at the end of the day, it's all about carbohydrates. And so the big rage now is ketogenic or keto. And so there are some benefits there. At the end of the day, most of the research is limited to mice and rat laboratory studies. And when you look at the athletes that are performing at the highest level, it fails almost every time. So, we don't prescribe a type of eating, but we definitely focus heavy on the bad word, carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Complex carbs.
Carbohydrates is good. That's what energizes our brain. So, absolutely, and our body. So.
Love it or hate it, the body needs blood sugar, right? So, the source of it is
that's the key. Exactly.
Yeah, it's good. I'd say 80% of the people that I work with, that's the biggest hole, myself included over the years. You have to get that proper quality carbohydrate number through the roof, because again, we're asking the body to do way more than it was kind of normal to do.
Right.
The idea of hopping up and going and riding for 150 miles. Right. There's plenty of people who can do that, but that's not normal. The body isn't physiologically optimized for that, so it needs a little help. And making sure you have tons of adequate, high quality carbohydrate in your normal diet, and then of course during the event. That's critical. Like guidelines though, you may see these things repeat all the time. Don't try new stuff in competition. Make sure you have a plan. It's in place. it's routine.
Right, it has to
Race
be.
day needs to look like a normal like big workout day for you. Like it shouldn't
Absolutely.
be like a drastic like, well, I'm gonna try this new little thing I found on that day for my extra
Right.
bump. That rarely works.
It doesn't.
Right. The key components are going to be proper diet. So it's almost like everything we talked about up front about heart disease and just general healthy diet stuff.
Sure.
That all applies. So first we got to correct that because there's generally holes and gaps in that piece, right? So then we get that piece running, and then we're looking at the actual sport and what is the sport and what are their goals, and then it'll be like, all right, let's look at this thing from a perspective that we're not in it. Like there's lots of self-coach athletes.
Sure.
Myself, I did that for years, but you're not as objective, and you're in the woods, right? You can't really see the whole picture sometimes.
Right.
And so that's I think the benefit of having a third party be able to look at, what are your overall goals for like a year? Where are you in relation to like particular goals coming up? And so not getting frustrated with the process.
So again, you said for fueling before a race and for refueling after a race, carbohydrates are important. Give us a few examples of some of the best carbohydrates to consume before a race.
So this one also has an asterisk. Depends on the duration of the event.
Sure.
Right. So if someone's wanting to do like a 5K or let's just say an activity that's going to be under an hour, you don't need a lot. You don't need to worry too much. You just don't have a ton on your stomach. It's going to be probably higher intensity, but it's going to be over pretty quick. And so
Sure.
your body, you're not asking it to do much of what it can just do right now. So you can sit on the couch. So it's minimal. It's just make sure you're healthy, eating the right foods on your daily routine. Maybe the day of or the day before, if you want, you can have a little bump up, but you just don't have to stress it. Now, for a lot of people we work with, it's more of the endurance side,
Sure.
right? So if we're talking with someone about like a 100-mile mountain bike race, it's going to take, it might be 6.5, 7 hours. There might be people that complete it in 19 hours.
Right.
You're going to need a lot of food. And so, yeah, the days lead up to and the day of, there's some pretty hefty food requirements. So assuming the training and all that piece has gone well, yeah, we work with them trying to figure out what sits on their stomach, what's going to provide very measurable amounts of complex carbohydrates, adequate protein, enough nutrition that it's going to get them going, it's going to fuel that activity for as long as possible. And then what do you do during the event? Because again, events of those durations,
Right.
you got to take stuff in. If someone's doing an Ironman triathlon, they're not going to do it off water, or very well. So yeah, it's using foods in training. It's still the same core concepts, but the foods that you can make skew a little bit towards like the higher caloric density. So most people are familiar with like power bars and Cliff bars, and they're okay. But there's a lot of those food type things you can make yourself.
Absolutely.
And we teach a lot of those classes too, like make your own bars.
I make my own bars.
Yeah, that's awesome. So those things, it's a lot of calories in the technical package.
So let's move into the general population. I do understand that a nutrition plan is not the same for everyone. However, there are some basic principles. We talked about it earlier: the fruit, the fiber, the whole grains, the protein, the carbs, etc. So, and we've touched on this before, but what nutrition practices can you provide for just the common everyday person who's maybe not the sports athlete, or they're just trying to really gain a good understanding of how to be healthier with the proper nutrition practices? Yeah,
if we want to put a name to it, what we're largely discussing with people is kind of called whole food, plant-based. We're not necessarily proponents of 100%,
sure,
but there are very tangible benefits all across that spectrum. So again, it comes back to like the produce thing. So in the general population, fruits and vegetable intake, fiber. So again, that again, I said it probably 3 or 4 times, but that's the cornerstone. That's the base layer that really needs to occur. And then the rest of it's kind of arguing the margins. Like if someone's going to do a little bit of fish, right? So like as dietitians, we know this information, we see the results in our clients and all this stuff, but I wouldn't say we're 100% plants.
sure,
Maybe 90, 95. I mean, there's going to be, we reserve I guess the non-versions of those for situational stuff. Like if I'm working on site somewhere and someone provides a lunch, I'm probably just gonna eat it. I'm not gonna make it weird for people, you know.
Right.
And so basically that last 5-10% is almost as much effort, if not more, than that first 90.
Right.
But when we talk about the actual health benefits, to your question, like what should people do? And if we look around the globe at populations, you know, around 80% plants or so in your diet, you get 95% of the benefits. And
Right.
I will gladly accept that. And when we all get there, we can all argue the
That
last
totally
bit.
makes
Yeah.
So in general, you don't have to put your nutrition in a box. Focus primarily on plant-based, and then just have other, hopefully healthier item choices in your reach. But you don't have to necessarily be in a box in terms of this is what my plan needs to be every day. In fact, it's probably not good to eat the same exact foods every day, but to add variety to your diet.
Yeah. Again, everyone's so different. I'm always amazed at people, but to your point, some people want that. Some people they're like, I don't care about food. Just tell me these 3 things to eat, breakfast, lunch, dinner, every day, and I'll do that. We provide that. Now, I feel like if I'm telling someone what to eat literally per meal, I have failed, because my goal is to educate them to understand what they should be choosing, and then the window's open.
Absolutely. Enjoy it.
It's
Open your
so-
palate up to
oh,
so
wow,
many
yeah.
different flavors and tastes. And
That might be my
Interesting.
favorite thing of becoming a dietitian is through the course of being a dietitian, you have to open yourself up to
Yes.
that. And we've tried and played with and used all kinds of foods. There's no way we would have even thought about
right.
prior. And just through education and learning, like you find these things that other cultures are using, or even
Yes.
people in our culture, you just don't know they're using it. There's so much awesome food, and you can try it, and it's great.
Yes. And you know what I love is I love a lot of just herbs and spices and flavoring foods, you know. Put away the salt, put away the sodium and all those fats, the butter and all of that, and try some good wholesome nutrients that you get from rosemary or thyme or some various different spices and herbs that you can consume. That's really important too.
Yeah, essentially at that point, right, you're just adding more vegetables.
You are.
So there's dried powdered versions, but it's the same thing.
Exactly.
Except they're very concentrated forms, so in many cases they're really, really powerful.
They are powerful. And delicious, yeah. Look at the big picture. Seek education. You can get educated from Aaron through his company, Custom Fit, Nutrition and Wellness. Incredible resources to get a lot of information and education about healthy nutrition for you and tailor-made for you. We can always learn something, right? We
Always.
never stop
Always.
learning
Every
and
day.
growing. So we thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking with you and having a great conversation about nutrition. You've enlightened us immensely. So please take home all of his tips and employ them in your life today so that you can achieve health and wellness with nutrition. If you need to speak to a specialist and need to get in touch with Aaron, he is at Custom Fit Nutrition and Wellness here in Raleigh. Give him a call. He'll point you in the right direction, give you lots of tools in your toolbox so that you can start a life of health and wellness. Thank you for joining us today, and as always,